Hi everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research, a new Wall Street Journal article. It's a long one, and I'll go through the whole thing here just so you know what was covered in this hit piece. But looking at the stock first, we broke $18 today in the early morning, up more than 8% at some points, and we'll see if it will hold throughout the rest of the day and the whole week. And looks like the Wall Street Journal article is not hurting the stock one bit. So the article released today had a headline-grabbing name that said Palantir's momentum hurt by slowing growth in government deals. And then basically retail is the reason for the rich valuation here in the subtitle. Now, strong opinions are about to come out from everyone, but factually, they're not saying anything incorrect per se, but they definitely reference a few opinions that obviously have had their own blunders and agendas. So we open up that Palantir has had a slowdown in the US government contract growth and that the DoD wants to look at competitors because they're cheaper and afraid of vendor lock-in with Palantir. So that's not new information per se, but they're setting up the narrative as if it's the end of the Palantir in a way that we know that's not at all the case though for the federal government. Now, coping with that slowdown, they're trying to push overseas, and it doesn't take a dummy to think about Ukraine and Israel to make that argument or see Palantir is having trouble at home, so they need to go abroad. But in reality, that's not really the case. I'd say the motivations are to seek growth away, and we know Palantir has stated growth is in the U.S. still mainly, and of course commercial. But government too has been their bread and butter and haven't heard otherwise from management, and they still are going to help our allies overseas, so why not go for it? But here's where we get our first kind of double quoted opinion from RBC, who has a $5 price target, just so you know, on Palantir. Sure, you could take all their cash and maybe some tiny 3x multiplier of that, and you got your $5 price target. But we already know the direction they're going based on the analysts that they're quoting, but at least they put Karp's quotes as well on the lumpiness of the US government's business, and notes it has to be looked over a longer period of time to understand their value and growth in the segment. Now, they also bring up the Army Vantage platform, which did do a recent extension with Palantir, just so you know, and we also know for the next year, they're trying to diversify and gain flexibility with other vendors so they can play together here, and that is true. And it will foster for better competition and innovation in the industry while keeping prices lower. And Palantir and Karp has actually advocated this for the government, and that's to buy software that actually works, albeit even if it's not Palantir. But they are painting this as if Palantir's lunch is getting eaten when it's furthest from the truth. And then they got to put the irrelevant quote here about my contention is that all that data is generated by the Army is Army. And they note he doesn't point out Palantir specifically because that's truly what he means. It's completely irrelevant, but still want to bring up data ownership when Palantir has never been in control or owned the data, but still a point of contention for anyone that talks about them. But they want to paint this picture with the analysts that they want to do a new analysis of their own data and that they're having trouble here, which is literally the business model though of Palantir. They are the analysis software enabling you to do it. It'd be like, oh, all my data is on your platform, therefore I can use all your tools at my disposal no matter what. That's kind of a weird way to think you'd have access to all that. But they want to quote this here to make it look like there's a bunch of bad reviews and obviously creating this weird narrative of pushing Palantir out and replacing them with, say, a Deloitte or Booz Allen. But it is funny they keep away from any hard figures on this point to ensure that they cover their bases. And then we got our friends at William Blair. Yes, and for those who don't know, that was sarcastic. Essentially, they did this whole analyst report knocking Palantir, losing the Vantage platform, and basically the end of the world, painting it like the Army doesn't like Palantir and they're trying to get them out as soon as possible. Then the Army themselves, as well as Shyam Sankar, clarify that they are happy with Palantir, and then we get the extension. So yes, maybe long-term in the next phase, they want more vendors to play along, but creating this narrative that the Army is trying to push out Palantir is a bit exaggerated and aggressive. Then we transition to artificial intelligence and the AIP platform, which is the new growth engine for the company in the future. And they pull out the valuation, of course. So yes, we know it is a rich valuation from traditional metrics. And yeah, a first grader could see that too. But people buying at a rich valuation have an expectation of growth into it for other reasons, which is what the real point of contentions are and should be discussed, I'd say. Then it kind of goes off on a slight tangent here, talking about the NHS contract and all the media backlash, but still having them win, even though it's a smaller contract than expected. But they go back to the fastest growing side, which is commercial. And we end up right where we are today, and actually has my same perspective of looking for evidence of growth again in 2024, which is the big story. And the wait and see approach really is the story in my opinion, and can hurt or help the stock depending on the next earnings and what we learn throughout the year. And then we close out on the Army Vantage platform, not wanting to be vendor lock-in just so they hit the point home again. So yeah, I know it was a mouthful here, but they neglected to bring up the biggest element here, I think, with their US government business that exactly combats this vendor lock-in narrative. Palantir has FedStart. Their IL certification and FedRAMP literally gets these startups from the ground floor the ability to work with the United States government. It enables competition and allows competitive pricing because they have to showcase their values here, and this gains them more access. So it basically does counter this whole narrative of the efforts to enable competition and would essentially make this Wall Street Journal article fall apart in my opinion. So my 2 cents here is that this article is a long way to say that Palantir's government business is lumpy, and they timed this article to write it when the government growth is a bit slower here. And if you look at the stock as well, yes, of course you can bring up valuation here at any point, but that tends to happen with any company where there's built-in expectations. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.